So we actually have Open Source Summit coming up in just a couple weeks. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit. Olivier, last I saw, we still hadn't found a location, so I haven't really been advertising anything for a meetup.
Me neither. The few contacts I had taken a few weeks ago didn't respond, or there were probably too many things happening on their side and mine. So I'm still open for any form of gathering, and
yeah. So we'll just make it informal.
And
yeah, so we'll just make it informal. Did you ever tell me if your students plan to attend the event, or?
So I asked them, and they seem to prefer just to come for the day. So it means there won't be any hotel room.
Okay.
And they weren't so much into. They have no experience about any open source conference and stuff like that, so maybe they could enjoy it, but they are not like Linux fanboys or stuff.
Yep.
So they probably don't matter much if it's just meeting Matt.
Okay, so they just need help with the train then?
Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. We can help cover that.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I'll have to think about how we do that, but.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that the thing to do is, it may be the best thing to do is for Matt to buy the tickets and expense them. So then it just becomes a question of you telling Matt which train tickets to buy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the simplest way to do it.
And their names and phone number, something.
Yeah. So I'll leave that between you and Matt then.
Yeah. I think Derek wanted to send me some stickers in advance so I could bring them and have them to make them available on location. But I don't know if he's made progress for the address labeling and so on.
I'm not sure. We'll have to follow up with Derek later. He's traveling today.
I was under the impression he already did that because I remember him saying something about shipping things internationally.
So we can check, and if worst case, Matt has some too. So.
Yeah, it wasn't. Oh yeah, it was to make sure Matt was traveling in a lighter way.
Okay. Matt, I think you had some things on PRs and
just Liza, maybe for Matt's travel. Matt, if you plan to be staying around Paris in any case, just tell me. I'm not sure if you're going directly to Lyon or if you will stay around with your family and so on. So just tell me if you need or if you have some time in Paris or anywhere.
Okay. Right now it's looking like not. We're going to be there very briefly because we're flying in there. But then once we recover from our flight, we're going straight to Lyon.
Okay.
But if that changes, I'll let you know. We are also we're going north for a little bit to visit David G in the UK.
Okay.
That's our other plan.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Matt, I think you wanted to go over the roadmap a little bit in more detail since we're sort of celebrating our first anniversary and looking forward to the next year.
Sure. Let me join so I can share my screen. Join from my PC. Give me a second.
All right, 1 sec.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Share desktop. And can you see this?
Yes.
All right. This really shouldn't be new because we've talked about this probably ad nauseum. But now that we have a place to point to for the 1.0 roadmap, I figured I'd show you guys just overview what's involved here. One thing I do want to call out, because there has been a lot of ideas on augmentations for the platform. This is the Antidote 1.0 sort of roadmap is not meant to be like the final state of Antidote. It's just it's a 1.0 roadmap. That's it. There will be a 2.0. There will be a 1.5. So the reason, to be honest, the primary reason for this is to address what I view as like gaping holes in the platform. So with respect to Olivier, I saw your note on integration with that, whatever it's called, the one protocol for learning management systems.
NPI.
Yeah. So I thought about maybe putting that into MP1, but I actually thought like one of the reasons we're doing MP1 is to break Syringe apart into different services. And so once we do this, we could very easily come back and add a new service for that integration. And so that's a really good example of like a post MP1 project.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Same thing with like authentication, or maybe that does take place within the context of integrating with an LMS. So the cool thing about a lot of the work that's here is it is meant to be very temporal. Like this is not meant to stretch on and solve all the problems. So I want to be very careful about scope creep, because that's, it's not meant to address all the problems and implement all the features. There will be space. In fact, specifically MP1, the whole point of MP1 is to create space for all those other features. Objective verification is another one. I actually wanted to do that a long time ago, and it kind of exists in the current version of Syringe, but it's the use case for verifying optional objectives is very event driven in nature. So it kind of makes sense that we do the MP1 project first, and then come back and circle back and do that later. So for that kind of stuff, I've been sort of passively opening, note PRs, like blueprints for the Scratch directory editor idea that Toad and I have had. So these are all things that I want to address after MP1. And those are just examples. So the reason I bring that up is this isn't meant to be exhaustive. This isn't meant to be like, okay, if we ever want to get anything done with Syringe or Antidote, whatever, like we got to get it in these projects. That's not the case. This is just what I have viewed, basically over the last year, and then of course with feedback from everybody else, what I viewed as the big gaping holes, the things that I still feel make Antidote and by extension NRA Labs still in its proof of concept phase. Addressing these moves us out of that phase and into a more mature phase of actual maintainable software. So that's it. That again, that's just the first step though. That's 1.0 that gets us on a stable footing. Once we get all of these things done, we can say, okay, cool. We have a good stable platform now. There's extensibility and long-term maintainability built into the platform now, so we can continue and build the additional features that we've been waiting for after this point. Some of these things will not be a surprise. And a lot of these aren't even decided yet. As you can see, the proposed design and implementation plan for each is a pull request. That means that those are still being worked on. I will tell you the one that will be finished first is likely to be MP1, although Derek is working hard on MP3. So we'll see who wins. MP2 is actually, to be honest, that's probably the easiest to complete, just because most of that work is being done by the contractor that we've engaged for the UX revamp. So I can easily sort of sum up the scope of what's being done there. And I actually should have done that a long time ago, just to give folks a heads up that we're doing that. I don't know that everybody. I think everybody on the call knows this, just because we've talked about it a lot. But I don't think everybody, like on the forums, for instance, knows that we're working with a contractor for that. So maybe I should actually complete MP2 first and the draft for that first, and just say, here's what's happening. Here's what the contractor's doing. Here's what the contractor's not doing, so that folks can understand what they can continue to work on while that work's going on. I just thought of that just now, so maybe that's useful. Anyway, that's MP2. MP2 is kind of like MP1. It's like, okay, Antidote Web was it looks like it was designed by a child, so let's fix that. MP3, like I said, is being worked on by Derek. That's again more of a how can we make the Antidote images easier to create and integrate with, and augment, while at the same time adding a nice consistent security layer using virtualization, without making it really bloated, which Derek's made a lot of headway on. Actually, he's doing a lot of really good work there. MP4, I still have this here, but like I said, I've had thoughts lately that have me convinced that perhaps this is not really a mini project, because again, it's not necessarily like a 1.0 thing. It's something that we can easily do in a separate sort of just a standalone PR, because it is all mostly mostly something that requires MP1 to be finished. And I generally don't want to have, with these mini projects for 1.0, I generally don't want to have like a ton of interdependence on each other. I don't want it to be, sort of implied that one relies on the other, or even expressly stated that way. So I don't know, MP4 might go away, but here it is for now. It might just go into a separate proposal. And then in the top of that proposal, it might say, hey, we're waiting till 1.0 is done, and then we'll do this. Because I think if we do MP1 the right way, which I'm putting a lot of effort into MP1 to make sure that the architecture is easily extensible, not just from a, like a services perspective, because there will be a message bus there, but also from like a data modeling perspective. So any database changes that need to be made there are fairly easy to make. So we'll see. MP4 might not make the cut, but we'll see. It's there for now. Finally, MP5, the next generation self-medicate. This is pretty important, because we wanted to we wanted to solve a lot of the problems that self-medicates had thus far. In particular, just the fact that you kind of have to know Kubernetes in order to troubleshoot it. But also, it doesn't really help you build content. It kind of like forces you to figure out a way to build your content using some other way, usually by copying and pasting somebody else's content and then modifying it, which is totally fine. It's it's whatever gets, as long as whatever gets submitted doesn't have any of that copy pasta in it, that's fine. But that's not ideal. That's not very easy to do. So we were hoping to, for a long time actually, I was hoping to build a wizard into Syringe at first that allowed to like basically say like, hey, I'd like to create a new lesson. And then it walks you through a bunch of questions on like what kind of things you want to put in, like the title and the stages and all that. Thinking about it more, we may still do that in Syringe, but we might also build basically a separate web application. So not Antidote Web, but something kind of like that, that is expressly built for the purpose of creating lessons in a visual way. So drag and drop topologies, drop down, quizzes for creating lessons and all kinds of stuff like that. So we'll see. That's probably the least well-formed of all these mini projects, but we'll see how that goes. And then finally, the top-level execution plan. This is absolutely not final. I just want to say that. I have, in fact, as soon as MP1 is done and I'm ready to start that work, I'll be coming back and totally changing this and identifying specific mini project milestones to put here, as well as these are sort of other things that I think represent a 1.0 release, but they don't really warrant a mini project. They're just changes. So those are going to be mixed in with each other and placed here. And then once those drafts are more or less finished, I'm going to go back to the release planning and the Antidote platform, and this process will be followed for version 0.5.0. So first step is to get all of this stuff more or less finalized, which, like I said, I think the drafts will be, marked as reviewable. One or more of the drafts will be marked as reviewable, hopefully in the next few weeks. And then once those are all reviewed and everybody's sort of, on the same page with what the work that's going to take place there, I'm going to make sure these get at least 0.5 and 0.6 get updated. That way we have a good sort of short-term roadmap. And then I'll start executing per the release plan on 0.5. And then we'll just continue. We'll continue to march towards And I don't know how many releases it'll take right now. Like I said, that's part of what I need to finish, but eventually it'll end in 1.0. So this is live. This roadmap is live. It's not final. It still should be considered a living document. You'll notice that each mini project also has a discussion forum. So if you want to talk about any mini project, I created categories for that in the forums. And there's a brief summary of what we want to do in each one. Any questions about this?
So I guess my question is, how can we divvy up the work a bit so that it's not all Matt?
Well, the milestones in each one actually have specific issues opened. I've tried to break down the work pretty well.
Okay.
Is this feels like not the MP1 PR? I guess it is. So if you scroll down, wait, that's weird. I need to clean this up. Here we go. So in each mini project, we should have individual milestones, and those milestones should be composed of one or more GitHub issues. So as an example, did I cut those? I can't remember. I really need to clean the bottom part of this up. I've been focusing mostly on the top part. Let me see if I can find. The syringe. The issues, because there is a few 1.0. Yeah, here we go. So here's a specific task, and this is the idea. I'll have to go make sure this is the case, but the idea is that this would have been linked from the actual MP1 doc, and this is a specific piece of work. So at the end, by the time the MP1 doc, as an example, and we should do this for all of the MP docs actually. Each mini project doc will have a design, like here's how the final state will work once MP1 is finished, and then it'll have a work breakdown in terms of milestones. And each of those milestones will link to an issue like what I just said, and those issues should represent, a PRable worth of work. And they'll be contained here. So the milestones will be something that will, in sort of the syringe mini project, I break it down like this. Mini project, milestone 1.1, move state to external database. So this is actually probably a pretty big task, but we'll document what's required there, and then somebody can come across, and then that'll be contained in an issue, and that issue will be linked right here, and then somebody can say, okay, well, I know a lot about how to use like the SQL ORM in Go, and I am very comfortable with writing migration scripts, so I'm going to take on this particular part of the project. And somebody else can, and a lot of these can be done in parallel. And that's part of what I'll build in the doc, is understanding what could be done in parallel and what can't. And so somebody else can then be, maybe I can work on this in parallel to that.
As far as MP1 is concerned, I'm afraid there wouldn't be so many people volunteering for working in parallel to your work. I'm afraid that you're the likely candidate for doing all of that, no?
Well, that's fine. I mean, if that ends up being the case, that's okay with me. But what I want to do is I want to break down the work so that in the worst case scenario, if I do end up doing all the work, people just know what's going on. But in the ideal case scenario, people understand where they can contribute. There will be small tasks. To be clear, there will be things, small things that can be done pretty easily. And my job in building this doc is to help articulate what those things are. But
I think you're most precious on syringe and MP1 because it's probably more complex and the base that we need to move the other mini projects. So I would say you have to focus on that. Whereas other mini projects could be more depending on syringe, and then people can work in parallel. But for the MP1, I don't know. Maybe someone will come out of the woods and say, "Okay, I know Go, and let's help Matt." But
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of my goal is to just build the design and build the work breakdown so that if people exist like that, that they have the opportunity to come to, as you say, come out of the woodwork and let themselves be known.
Well, so one certainly can, wait for happenstance, but if there are, specific skills, for example, that we don't currently have in our community, but are needed for a particular type of work, we can go recruiting for them, right? And you have an event coming up in a couple weeks where that would be an ideal thing to do. So it might be worth spending a little bit of time to think about specifying what those, what's missing and what kinds of people whom would we need to get involved in order to kind of parcel out the work a bit more.
Yeah, sounds good to me. So that's it for me. I mean, like I said, this is all still very much in progress, but the 1.0 is starting to form, and then MP1 is also starting to form. That's sort of what I'm focusing on at the moment.
Plenty of work. Great.
All right, are there other things we need to discuss today?
Maybe if Stefan is here, I could just ask you to review some of the bugs or the proposals I had on the syringe. So I made a few tests. I don't know if you noticed some of the tickets. Sorry, my phone is ringing. So I did some tests on Linux, I did some tests on Windows 10, and I have a few pending PRs or proposals. So I don't know who's in charge of taking the time to review that, or if it's probably not urgent, but I feel that some of the issues I had, others may have. So it could be a showstopper, and they could be too shy to ask or report in the forums and so on. So I don't know. If you have some time to have a look. I know, Stefan, you responded today or yesterday. Thank you. Matt, maybe if you can have a look.
Yep, so I was out of town all last week when you did that testing, and I'm catching back up on work this week. So hopefully closer to the end of the week, I'll be able to take a look. I like your recommendation on changing images to one that has more availability with hypervisors. Mm-hmm. So I'll test that change out in my Windows environment. I want to see if I can flag when, I know I can flag when host updater is not installed and tell the users to make the host edits manually. But I want to see if there's a way to flag if the host file failed, host updater failed, to tell the users to manually make the changes, or send them a link on how to fix the host updater. Mm-hmm. So I want to test that later this week as well. And then I'm looking at, so I moved my laptop from VirtualBox to Hyper-V with mm-hmm. Windows 10. So looking at how to run the self-medicate Vagrant through Hyper-V. So I'll be doing testing on that.
And also, one of the things I experienced in the last test I did on Sunday night, I guess, was a CRLF conversion issue. I don't know if you noticed. So it's classical problem when you use Git on Windows with some defaults that will use standard line endings, and when you're in Vagrant, it causes some trouble. So I'm not sure how to solve that, but I expect many people to experience that. So I don't know how to best address that. There are probably a few options. But again, maybe I'm just the only one trying to test that, and no one else discovered such bugs, so I don't know. Maybe it's not urgent, but I fear it's a bit of complexity for newcomers. But I don't have a clear idea how to best proceed.
Sure. And I too experience issues with Windows and line ending. I don't know the best way to do that. How I changed my Git was to force Git to use Unix line endings. And I may recommend that you can do it per project, setting the config.
With the .git attributes?
You could also do that. We could do the .git attributes in the project, which would should pick that up. Yeah.
Okay.
As long as they're using a newer version of Git.
Oh yeah. Okay. But for the rest, the Vagrant approach seems quite reasonable. So I'm thanking you because I mentioned it last time, I guess, but you weren't there. So thanks for this contribution.
You're welcome. And then I also saw your comment about the using a config file. And we should be able to do a config file for self-medicate. I may have broken that when converting to the Vagrant, so I'll look at fixing that. I think you commented with a fix for it. So
I have something that looks good enough, but I'm not an expert in Ruby syntax and so on. So it was just like random poking, and it seems to work.
yeah, I'll test your branch out, and if Matt or others want to do that as well, they can.
Yeah, I think Derek's a lot closer to this than I am, but I thought he was going to take a look at this last week. I gotta ask him. I think he's still traveling. I'll ask him what he looked at, if anything, last week. But if not, worst case scenario, I'll take a look. Excuse me, I didn't get my coffee, by the way. I need to go do that. If that's not obvious. Anyway, yeah, I'll take a look at it as well.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Besides this, Matt, you proposed a few days ago, or you posted on the forum about the new ways to run Antidote Web and Syringe without Kubernetes. Am I right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think my students were looking for that. So probably they did test it, but I haven't had any feedback. So it saves us the need to use a Docker push to redeploy into self-medicate. So I guess it's interesting.
So to be clear, this is not for any. If you're just working on, it's meant for people that are working on Antidote Web. That's like that's the main use case. If you want to do web development on that on Antidote Web today, or I guess whatever 2 weeks ago previously, it was kind of impossible. What you would have to do really was like deploy. You have to deploy self-medicate really, because you had to have Syringe, because Syringe has the API that powers most of the things that take place in the web front end. And then Syringe, in turn, needs a working Kubernetes cluster because it automatically connects when it starts.
Yeah.
And if it fails, it shuts down. So that basically meant you needed self-medicate. And so like the way that you made changes to the web front end is you effectively, changed the manifest for Antidote Web inside of Kubernetes and pointed it to like your own Docker repo.
Yeah.
And then when you made changes to the I'm assuming this is what you were talking about. Then you would have to push, rebuild, you make changes, rebuild using that your own repo, push to that, and then restart the Antidote Web pod so that you would see your changes. I mean, that is ridiculous amount of overhead just to make basic website changes. So yeah, not great. What I did basically instead was I added a new service, and this is also something that's going to be made a lot easier, by the way, in Syringe MP1. What I did was more or less a stopgap measure, because once we have MP1 in place, we'll be able to put in a data model that is just sort of static for Syringe, and then we'll just simply not start any schedulers. But in the meantime, what I did was I created a third service. I call it Syringe D-Mock. It does a really simple thing. It just starts the Syringe API, and it doesn't try to do anything else. It's basically just like Syringe D, which is the normal Syringe sort of scheduler binary process, except that it doesn't do most of the things that that process does. The only thing it does is it starts the API, and that's it. And it offers very static data. It's like literally compiled into the binary for now. Again, this is going to be a lot easier once MP1 is done. But for now, basically, that's what you got. You got Syringe D-Mock. Now, the cool thing is you shouldn't have to touch that. Because what I did in Antidote Web was I also developed a Docker Compose file that uses that and then just simply runs it alongside an Antidote Web container that's built. So the cool Docker Compose allows you to both use pre-built images as well as supporting building a new image as part of the Docker Compose sort of up state. So that's like that basically offers a really nice way to preview Antidote Web changes. So it'll start Syringe D-Mock, and then it'll build the Antidote Web container at local on the file system, and then start it. And that's it. That's pretty much all you need, because again, there's no need for Kubernetes. There's no need for there's no need for a VM or anything like that. It's just running in containers.
Okay.
So that said, if there's actually not, this wasn't you guys, but there were some folks that were confused about. I think somebody from some Red Hat was confused that this was like for building lessons. This has nothing to do with that. This has nothing to do with like self-medicate. Self-medicate's still the way to go for building lessons, because you really need you really need like a working version of all of this if you want to build lessons. So this is just for hacking on the web front end.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. So yeah, please play with that. I mean, it seems like it works for me. I verified with somebody else that has yet to join these stand-ups, but she also is looking to do some minor web improvements, and seems to work for her. But obviously, it was something I threw together within a few days, so I'm sure it could be improved. Like I said, though, I once Syringe MP1 is done, being able to have like a fake or just being able to upload or being able to have any version of the platform running that you want, that way you can develop on it very easily. I think that'll be a lot easier. That's part of what I want to do in MP1. So you don't have to statically compile lesson definitions into the binary. I would not recommend doing that long term.
All right. Anything else we need to cover today?
Nope.
All right.
There are men outside drilling holes into my sidewalk.
Is that what the clicking in the background is?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
They're wearing orange vests though, so I assume that's the thing. There is no authentication. This is a free and open society. There's no authentication for these people. They're just coming up and drilling holes because they're wearing vests. Nobody asks questions. Actually, I just saw a video. This is actually really funny. Sorry, this is a tangent, but there was this video where these people had this theory that if they could walk into any place that would normally, that you normally had to like pay to get in, like a movie theater or a museum or something like that, as long as you were carrying a ladder, no one would stop you.
Yeah.
And they did it like 5 times, 6 times in a row.
Yeah. Social engineering at its best.
It is amazing. I love social experiments like that. It's crazy. We are very hackable.
Yeah, no, there was I think it was a cathedral in Germany where there was like a gang who stole a bunch of lead from the roof. And again, it was same kind of thing where people just assumed that they were up there working on the roof because they were working on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Who keeps track of what's going on with the roof, right?
Yeah.
Guess what, Pat? We tried to buy a ladder and we give it to my students and we check if they can come to the VIP part of Open Source Summit, something like that.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Well, if we don't have anything else for today, why don't we close the call and onward and upwards, and we'll talk more next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.